Once Tiberius felt that he had his fun with these boys, he would have them thrown off a cliff while he watched. The upright jerker.
Whatever they said, I did it. Whatever they said, I did it. Give me the upright jerker. What do you think a human mating call would sound like if you couldn't say anything? That's a pretty good one.
Oh, love, never knew what I was missing.
We got the worst execution methods from around the world. I think I'm gonna invent a new one for all the Glazers. You're gonna die with a horse cock in your throat. That's how you're gonna go out.
Executions, everybody seems to talk about what their last meal would be, but nobody seems to talk about what their execution method would be. And in this video, I'm gonna show you some truly obscure and brutal execution methods from around the world that you would never want to experience.
I'm gonna be real.
And as always, this video only gets more brutal as the
What's the best execution method? Best is anything that would make my death quick. Death by firing squad.
list goes on. Italy, falling. Italy has a long and rich history, and for that reason, I'm gonna give a few examples of how they used this one torture method throughout different parts of its history in different ways. Let's start in pre-Roman Sardinia. Imagine you're just an old person living in your little hut, maybe on the coast of the island that you reside on. You realize that you're getting up there in age and realize that soon the ritual was going to happen. One day, a group of young men come into your house and tell you it's ritual time, and you prepare for what's about to happen, as you've seen it happen to other men your age. You're first given a mysterious neurotoxic drink. You are then carried to a nearby cliff by these young men. But these young men aren't just on this cliffside to watch the sunset with you. They are raising you above their head Lion King style and throwing you off a cliff. That's right. The first execution method we're talking about is falling. Definitely one of the most simple entries on this list, but trust me, the implications are pretty wild. In this first example I gave in pre-Roman Sardinia—
Would they just do that once you got too old? Were they just trying to keep the average age of their country down? Why did they do that?
People were literally just executing the elderly. Like, this was a common ritual. During this time, if you were an elderly person who was unable to support themselves, you were ritually killed. And this was just an accepted practice in pre-Roman Sardinia. And as I described how this
actually kind of makes sense though. Nobody wants to take care of you. Nobody wants to take care of you. Unless you got immediate family. Nobody wants to put up with you. No one wants to put up with you.
Would typically go is they would get the old person intoxicated through a neurotoxic plant that was known as the sardonic herb. Regardless, once they get their elderly victim nice and high, they will take them somewhere nice and high. And at that point, they have one of two options. They are either dropped from a high height or beaten to death and then dropped from a high height. And that's just the Sardinian version of an old folk song. There's really not too much more to say about literally falling off a cliff, but it is an interesting execution method, and I wanted to add it specifically for this reason because in Italy, they were just doing it differently. This wasn't the only time that falling was used as an execution method in modern-day Italy. For example, during the Roman Empire, an emperor by the name of Tiberius was known
Can we talk about how cool these sculptures are? Ted, I'm not gonna lie, I want a sculpture at my house.
This method also for an interesting reason. Emperors would execute people for a plethora of reasons.
Just like a
Tiberius would specifically execute boys that he was no longer enjoying physically, if you get my drift. Once Tiberius felt that he had his fun with these boys, he would have them thrown off a cliff while he watched. But he was compassionate because he didn't have these boys thrown onto rock. He had these boys thrown into water. Obviously, being thrown into water could still lead to instant death or death by drowning, but there is a chance that these boys could survive. But don't worry, Tiberius definitely thought of this. So when he had these boys thrown off a cliff into the water, he had men in boats below waiting for these boys to land in the water where they could then break their bones with the oars if needed. So yeah, falling is definitely one of the most prehistoric and simple methods of execution. But in Italy, back in the day, they were using it for some very strange reasons. But let's move on.
I ain't gonna lie. Could you imagine living in a time period like this? Like, holy fuck, if you're not the king, which make no mistakes, I be the king, okay? I be the motherfucking king. But if you're not the king, you're basically like a modern day chicken, if you really think about it.
The United States, the upright jerker. I realize this execution—
Whatever they said, I did it. whenever they said I did it, give me the upright jerker.
Execution method sounds like your nighttime routine, but trust me, it's not nearly as fun. You see, in the 19th and early 20th century, the United States was doing a lot of hangings. And as society began to get more civilized, they thought, maybe these public hangings everybody loves is a bit barbaric. We should definitely keep executing people in public.
So would y'all go to a hanging if you were at that time period? I don't get why you would go to it. There's no way in hell I'd be going to no hangings. Unless it was like a bad nigga. Child, unless it was a bad nigga. I'd go to a bad nigga's hanging. But a regular, like if a nigga got a hanging because he parked in a motherfucking spot, okay, I'm not going. Yeah, just to see who did the crime. I guess you're right, because they don't even have, I gotta think about it. They don't even got like television and shit. They just got straight newspapers. And God knows I'm not reading no newspaper. Hey, I'm not reading no newspaper. You right. I'm going to every single one of these.
Differently. And the product of that thought was the upright jerker, which kind of sounds like a nickname you would give someone who sleepwalks and sleepwanks at the same time.
Is that possible? If you can do that, you need to get put down. I'll be real. If you can do that, you need to get put down. There's nothing good coming out of that. There is nothing good coming out of a person. No pun intended. No pun intended. But there's literally nothing good coming out of a person that can sleepwalk and you feel me.
Seriously though, where the upright jerker differed from the traditional hanging was as follows. Traditional hanging would take place on a gallows, typically high up with a trapdoor below the condemned person's feet. The executioner would open the trapdoor and the person would fall and the rope would snap their neck or quickly strangle them, with the weight of their body compressing their neck in the noose. During this time, there was a lot of high-profile botched hangings, which is why they decided to try something new.
I think I've heard of this.
The upright jerker differed from traditional hangings because instead of being dropped from a height onto your neck, you would start on the ground and actually be lifted up by your neck. This would happen with the same style of noose being connected to the victim's neck, although the rope would be connected to a series of pulleys that would be connected to weights. So when the executioner was ready, he would activate the system and the condemned person would be hoisted up into the air, typically instantly breaking their neck, and if not, similar to hanging, would slowly be strangulated to death. The name upright jerker comes from the victim obviously being upright and being shot into the air, but jerker refers to how the body would typically move after they would be flung into the air, because the pulley system would typically bounce the body up and down, jerking them. Definitely morbid. And an interesting take on hanging I haven't heard of until now. Sri Lanka.
Wow.
Crushing by elephant. I
So
mean,
we heard
you
about this
probably
one.
already get the idea, but I'm going to give a bit more context because, believe it or
I
not, there
heard
is
about
some
this
nuance
one.
to this. Unlike the very first example I talked about, this method was used on criminals. So we're at least off to a better start. How this
Facts.
execution method
Wait, these other ones weren't used on... Chad, the upright jerker wasn't used on criminals? Am I missing something?
would work is after the justice system of the time would do its thing, and then the person was then sentenced to death, they would then have them ready for the elephant execution. How this would look is the condemned person would be put on a pedestal, typically a smooth stone surface, and then they would bring in the elephants. But here's the thing, the elephant could go one of many ways. Depending on how trained the elephant was, they would either walk the elephant back and forth over top of the person until the elephant accidentally stepped on the vitals of this person, or if the elephant was more trained, the elephant would deliberately step on the person's limbs, torso, and even head to quickly execute the individual. Pretty simple, but extremely brutal. But these weren't the only ways that they would use elephants to their advantage. In some cases, they wouldn't even have the elephant step on the person at all, at least not at first. They wouldn't start with the person laying down. They would allow the
elephant not bulletproof? Do you know what type of guns they use to kill elephants? Have you seen an elephant gun, my nigga? They are quite literally bulletproof. Look at the shit they need for these elephants. Look what they need for the elephants. They are You take this picture, you're in the record books. I'm gonna be real. You're in the record books. You take this picture, bro. Imagine this shit in Chirac. I'll be real, they're probably not far away from that. There's probably in the next couple years gonna be some person that busts into the Chicago Zoo, pull out a motherfucking elephant, and start blowing shit up with that RPG. I deadass wouldn't be surprised. I might put it in my bingo cards for 2030.
The elephant to grab the person by their trunk and throw them around. And then once they were thrown to the ground, the elephant would then, do its little moonwalk. This method was used not only in Sri Lanka,
Damn.
but also in India and other parts of Asia for quite a long time, and was even popular up into the late 19th century, although in modern times it's no longer used. However, the terrifying
no
stories
shit.
still remain. And if you plan on becoming a time-traveling criminal, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing anything in Sri Lanka during the 17th, 18th, or 19th century, unless you want to get up close and personal with
Chad, what was the best year to be a criminal?
Dumbo. China. Execution van. Century. Unless you want to get up close and personal with Dumbo.
1942 in Germany. Yo, I ain't gonna lie. That's not the worst take I've ever heard in my whole entire life. It's not. Definitely the Stone Age. Yo, do y'all think humans were ever doing like mating dances and like mating calls and shit? Like, do you think you were ever just like in a forest and you would hear a nigga go, "Oh, come suck my dick"? I don't think they were evolved enough to understand speech. So what do you think a human mating call would sound like if you couldn't say anything? This would be mine. Yeah. That's a pretty good one. Like, you hear that shit in the forest, it's dark, you're alone. GG's. G fucking G's.
China.
Okay, well, because it's gonna like that on everything that should sound crazy. I don't mean it in that way.
Execution vans. Okay, so this is the first modern method on the list, and
Wait, did
surprise,
they say
surprise, is
execution
one of the
vans?
only modern methods, because a lot of the modern methods now are humane as they can be, and most places don't even do executions anymore. But leave it to China to give us an interesting entry for this
Okay,
list.
bet.
And while most countries around the globe have been decreasing or even entirely eliminating the amount of executions they're doing every year, China is actually raising those numbers and has a plethora of laws that if you break, you can be executed, which is for that reason why they have the execution van, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is
Chad, I ain't gonna lie. Y'all better fucking hope that I never get into a place of power, because I'm going to make laws that y'all gotta glaze me at least once a year. Okay? No, not once a year, once a week. As soon as you open the front door, there's just gonna be a spot for my face. And you're gonna walk in and say something nice to me. And by the time I'm in power, it's probably gonna be like robots that are sitting there, and if you don't, you're just immediately nuked. Immediately nuked.
It is literally a van that is kitted out to kill criminals. From the
What?
outside, the van appears to be
What?
a 24-person bus, with its windows covered and with minimal police markings. But on the inside of this bus, it almost resembles a hospital room, although nobody in this van is going to be healed. Typically, how it would work is once you end up on a Chinese death row, instead of going to a part of the prison where you'd be executed, you would be picked up by the van. And once in the van, you'd be strapped down to an operating-style table and then injected with a lethal injection. And at that point, driven likely to the morgue. Truthfully, finding
Okay.
publicly available information on China's mobile execution
That's
chambers
not-
is a bit tough. Although
That's not really bad, though. That's not really bad.
it's definitely not a secret. These execution
like-
bans
it's
have
like
been in
house
use since
call
2003
execution.
and are still in use to this day. Although technically this method is only lethal injection, I think the fact that China has systematized it to a point where they've made it a literal mobile execution chamber for maximum efficiency definitely earns it a spot on this list.
I
Just
definitely
imagine
take that
living in
one.
China and seeing this thing though. Like in your everyday life, when you see a hearse go by, you get kind of that a feeling or a thought. But if you
Wait, Chad, I haven't seen a hearse in a long time. Wait, speaking of, Chad, when's the last time that you had to wait for a motorcade to go by with a hearse? Stizzy, try not to pause in the Yap Challenge impossible. Hey, Booty, I'll give you a good 30 seconds real quick. I got you.
you see an execution van go by, I can't imagine the literal aura of that thing. Can't be good.
Or,
Spain, the garrote. All right, buckle up. Things are really taking a dark turn now. The garrote was used in the 1800s and the 1900s and was used not only in Spain,
Chad,
but
that's
also
only-
in
that's
Spanish
only 100
colonies
years ago.
like the Philippines. And interestingly, the garrote was seen as a more merciful form of execution compared to the going technique of death by burning, which I'll let you make your own opinion on once I explain the garrote.
No,
The
no,
garrote
please.
consists of a small seat for you to sit on and a wooden plank going up your spine. Once in the
Okay.
seat, you would have a metal loop wrapped around your neck. And directly behind your head on the wooden post that your spine is aligned with would be essentially a big screw. And what this screw would
Okay.
do
No!
is actually twofold. Because as the executioner would turn the screw from behind your neck, a sharp piece of metal would slowly be pressing against the back of your neck. And with every turn, your neck would become crushed by the piece of metal literally securing your head to this post. And how this victim would die would vary. But the two most common methods were either one, having the person's brainstem literally explode due to
Oh! Chad, I made it! I made it a whole minute. I made it a whole minute. I made it a minute and 5 seconds. Can we get a little bit of clapping? Can we get a little bit of clapping?
due to the pressure from the spike going through the back of the neck. Or, if you were lucky, before you even got to that point, you were asphyxiated to death by the
least
pressure
it's
on
not
your
the
neck
pear?
through the metal loop.
The
Regardless,
pear.
the
What's the
garrote
pear?
is absolutely brutal. Just for a quick pop quiz, when do you think they stopped using this brutal device? The use was officially and finally abolished
27.
in 1978. Only 47 years ago. Chances are if you're watching this video, either your parents or possibly even yourself were alive during the time that this device was still in use. Some history isn't as far back as you think. Let's keep moving. Uzbekistan. Boiling alive. I'm going to preface this by saying that historically, boiling alive was used a lot in both England and China. But because we already talked about China and we're going to be speaking about England, I decided to pin this on Uzbekistan because they have the most recent recorded usage of this method. Now you might be asking yourself, what exactly is the method? And let me tell you. Death by boiling is when somebody boils not just water, but also animal fat, motor oil, cooking oil, or really any liquid of their choice, and then they would
Piss? Yo, has anybody tried boiling piss? No. I'm actually thinking, chat, that might be an original thought. Can you boil pee and drink it? False. Not only will your urine not rehydrate you, it will have the opposite effect and dehydrate you at a faster rate. Okay, so I guess niggas have boiled their urine. Year 20 of trying to have a fucking original thought.
submerge their victim into this boiling liquid, and the result would be likely one of the most excruciating experiences humanly possible. And for that reason, it's on the list. Historically, Henry VIII made boiling the
No one has ever gooned on a peach cobbler. Little do you know. Peach cobbler gets me going so much that I immediately combust. I haven't had peach cobbler in a long time. I've had... Oh, peach cobbler. Peach cobbler. Peach cobbler. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I remember. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's what I remember. Oh my gosh. That's what I remember. Before I die, I might stick my dick in it. Deadass.
official execution method for anybody who committed murder via poisoning, as well as anybody who committed high treason. And during the 16th century in Japan, Japanese bandits were boiled alive as well. But in more modern times, specifically from 1991 all the way until 2016, Uzbekistan is alleged to have been boiling suspected terrorists on the regular. And this is kind of confirmed by a United States Department of State.
What?
Specifically, in Japan, Japanese bandits were boiled alive as well. But in more modern times, specifically from 1991 all the way until 2016, Uzbekistan is alleged to have been boiling suspected terrorists on the regular. And this is kind of confirmed by a United States Department of State document from 2004, which confirmed that the Uzbekistan government had tortured 2 gang members, and their bodies were extensively bruised, burned, and reportedly submerged in boiling water as well, making that allegation a little bit more real. And since we're speaking about boiling people alive in the modern day, there's a documentary that came out in 2010 about sicarios, the Latin American gang. And during this documentary, during an interview with a sicario, the sicario claimed that the Mexican cartel would boil alive anybody found to be working for the police. And these people were boiled alive in oil until they were no longer alive. So even though in the modern day, no country has boiling alive on their menu of official execution methods, there are definitely places where it's still being done, which is a terrifying thought. Ancient Rome.
So y'all think boiling alive or burning alive would be worse?
And interesting execution is part of that history. Now, truthfully, penalty of the sack kind of sounds like something you'd pay a dominatrix for. But in reality, it's just the translation of the original Latin word, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because, well...
Where is it? I got you. Piona coli. Poena? No. Pona? No. Poena kulai.
Well, you guys roast me. And
Nope,
similar
I
to
got
the
you,
very
gang.
first
Poeno
execution
Kolai.
method that we talked about, this method of execution was reserved only for a specific crime. That crime being parricide, or killing a member of your immediate family. So at least it wasn't used on, someone
yeah!
just who was old. It was at
Hey,
least used on a
give
murderer.
it to these
But
niggas,
still, the
bro.
question remains:
Says
what is the punishment of this?
murdering someone in your family might be. Actually, there's a lot of things worse than it, but it's really far up there.
Whose
It's
sack
really
is
far
being
up there.
punished? How do they punish the sack? And don't worry, it's at least 100 times worse than any form of cock and ball torture you could imagine. Okay, jokes aside, penalty of the sack
No.
went as follows. Someone would kill their parents, they would get caught, they would get convicted, then they are awaiting execution. Execution day comes, and this is how it plays out.
All because they had to do the damn dishes, bro.
The criminal is first put into either a barrel or a large burlap sack. Person is then told to
Have all the power.
up into a ball, and the bag or barrel that they are in is then either filled with snakes, monkeys, dogs, or chickens. And
Oh
at that
my
point, the
lord.
barrel or sack is sealed, and then you are thrown into the water. So not only are you panicking in this small confined space while you are slowly drowning, you're also in there
dogs
with a
and
wild animal. Which,
monkeys!
first of all, what did the animal do? What did this chicken,
That
snake, dog, what
ass!
did
Shout
they
out
do?
to
They
the
didn't do anything.
snake.
That's just friendly fire.
Yo, chat, I want to get a snake.
Imagine just being a chicken and getting caught in the crossfire because this guy killed his parents. Regardless, in ancient Rome, drowning was simply not enough. That's wild. Medieval Europe. Rat torture. This method was pretty widely spread across all of Europe during the medieval era, so I'm just doing the region, not even the country. They were all guilty. Rat torture is definitely one of the most famous and one of the most brutal methods of execution likely ever used. And for that reason, you may already be familiar with
Yep.
this method. So I'll
I'm
keep
familiar
it
with
brief.
it.
This method was used on any range of criminals, and although the method was considered torture, it essentially had a 99.99% fatality rate. Here's how it would work. You would be walked into the execution chamber, the dungeon,
By the way, imagine the fucking aura of this. Imagine the aura of getting walked in chains and just seeing this shit. Like, these things are terrifying!
the medieval places where people died, and you would be strapped down. Once strapped down, you would have a rat placed typically on your stomach.
I
And
would
on top
die
of
right
that
there.
rat,
Chat,
they would
I would die right there. Nothing else needs to happen. This rat touching me, literally like Thanos snapping his fingers, I'm combusting. I'm dead.
place a small cage firmly on top of your stomach, trapping the rat onto your body. And now you officially have a pet rat. But unfortunately, this isn't the end of the torture method, as once this cage was secured to your body, the executioner would begin to apply typically heat to the rat to make it uncomfortable and force it to try to find a way out of this cage. And of course, it can't get through the metal cage, however, it could possibly burrow down. And that's exactly what would happen. This rat would begin to burrow and eat and scratch and claw through the person's body, typically going directly into their intestines, causing an excruciating and brutal experience that would typically not instantly kill you, but cause a slow, excruciating, painful death in anywhere from a few hours to even a few days in some cases. This death was typically brought on by a loss of blood or disease. And it's really as simple as that. I can't think of many things more brutal
Chad, even thinking about that, like, could you imagine?
than having rats forced to burrow through your body while you're still alive. And yet, there's still one final entry
What?
on this list.
What is this one?
England, drawing and quartering.
Whoa.
For the final entry on this
Whoa,
list, I
what is
knew there was
this?
only one suitable entry, that being drawing and quartering. Primarily because it's not even a single execution method. It is a combination of 3 used sequentially.
What?
And they intentionally keep you alive during the initial, I guess not even executions, just torture methods until they ultimately kill you. Drawing and quartering was reserved specifically for traitors. And this method was supremely brutal because they wanted to set a very strong example that if you were a traitor, that the consequences were above all else. And interestingly, this method of execution was actually so brutal that they didn't even do it on women. They only did it on men. This rule was in
Wow.
place because, spoiler alert, the men would be naked during part of this execution, and they figured it would be too indecent to do that to women. So instead, women only got beheaded or burned at the stake, which, as brutal as those are, they seem like child's play compared to drawing and quartering. So let's say you commit treason in medieval England. What exactly happens? First, you are removed from your jail cell and dragged by horse from the prison to the gallows. At that point, you are put on the gallows and hung. But not fully. You are only hung until you are half dead. Once the executioner feels that you are sufficiently hung, you are cut down. Once you are cut down, you are literally disemboweled, with the executioner removing your organs out of your body. And then the executioner will set your organs on fire. At that point, you are then beheaded. And then once you are beheaded, all 4 of your limbs are attached to separate horses, and the horses pull your body apart. And that is
that shit is like, I don't even know, bro. That's worse than Mortal Kombat finishers. Can we, like, that's worse than a Mortal Kombat finisher by a long shot.
is the long and short of drawing and quartering. And there was kind of variations on how this kind of happened, but this was the head honcho of all of the techniques used. Initially, I actually planned on putting tearing apart by animals on the list because that alone is an extremely brutal method of execution. But once I learned about drawing and quartering, I realized that I had to save
So
being torn apart by any animal for the
bro.
method that included that, along with 3 other literal execution methods.
I'm gonna draw and quarter you, bitch. There we go. There we go. Nope. That's the one. Chad, that's the one. That's the one. Y'all piss me. I'm a draw and quarter you, bitch. Yep. I like how that feels.